traumas, silences that continue to shape Vietnamese in the diaspora. Bringing together voices from psychology, sociology, and arts, the panel explores how war and displacement echoes across generations and how healing can emerge through acknowledgement and storytelling. Together, we reflect on how honoring those who were lost can guide us toward the future. And just before I introduce our great moderator for this section, I would like to kind of warm us up for this panel with a song from our pianist over there, Mr. Nguyễn Chí Công, who will play Mắt Biết.
Biển Nhớ.
Oh, Biển Nhớ by Trần Công Sơn. Could we please give him a round of applause?
Trước khi đánh trình diễn bài Biển Nhớ là tôi xin giới thiệu tôi là Nguyễn Chí Long, đi vượt biên năm 81 mà bị bắn ở trên biển đó. Cái viên đạn còn nằm trong đây, mà khi tôi lên đảo đó là tôi ở trong cái ban truyền thông, ban nghệ, mỗi lần mà rời đảo thì hát cái bài Biển Nhớ thì tôi rất là xúc động. Tôi nhớ lòng cái bài đó. Tôi giờ đây tôi sẽ đàn hết cái đàn trong lòng của tôi.
I would like to introduce our moderator for the next session. Quyên Ngô is a Los Angeles-based actor, organizer, and international trainer dedicated to fostering courageous conversations within and beyond the Vietnamese diaspora. Co-founder of vidIQ and also a celebrated narrator of Vietnamese literature, she brings a rich blend of artistic insight, political nuance, and movement experience to her work. I would like to welcome Quyên Ngô, please. Take that away.
Thank you and Alex. Hi, xin chào quý vị. Mình tên là Ngô Hoàng Quyên và mình sẽ là người điều hợp viên cho buổi trưa ngày hôm nay. Hi everyone, my name is Quyên Ngô, as Alex just introduced, and I will be the moderator for this session this afternoon. So one thing about this session is that it is, as you all have seen, titled The Ones We Lost, Trauma, Silence, and Healing in the Diaspora. Cái buổi đối thoại của trưa hôm nay là một cơ hội để nói về những con người và những câu chuyện mà nằm ở trong trong quá khứ và ở trong cái hiện tại của chúng ta, những câu chuyện và con người mà vẫn còn nằm ở trong bóng tối. Tuy nhiên, mặc dù cái đề tài này rất là quan trọng và đôi khi hơi nặng nề, nhưng Quyên rất mong là mình sẽ có cơ hội để có một không khí rất là cởi mở. Và một trong cái cách mà Quyên muốn tạo cái không khí và cái môi trường cởi mở cho cái buổi nói chuyện này là Quyên mong là tất cả mọi người ở trong quý vị sẽ tham gia cùng với các diễn giả của ngày hôm nay. Quyên đầu tiên Quyên sẽ mời 3 người diễn giả lên sân khấu. Quyên sẽ mời 3 người diễn giả từ giới thiệu về mình một chút xíu, và sau đó Quyên sẽ đặt một câu hỏi cho các quý vị mà đang ngồi ở trong cái phòng ngày hôm nay. Thì đầu tiên Quyên xin mời bác sĩ Đông Xuyến, tiến sĩ Thảo Hà và đạo diễn Đức Nguyễn lên sân khấu.
Thank you so much for joining me to the stage. I realize they didn't say any of that in English, so I'll just say a little bit in English and then I'll have our panelists participate. Again, my name is Quyên Ngo and I'll be moderating this panel for today. The topic of trauma, healing, and loss. When you translate it to Vietnamese, it's really about bringing to light the people and the stories that still remain in the dark or in the shadows. And so when we hear that, it can feel a little bit heavy. However, I want it to be a conversation that we have in the spirit of openness. So I said, một cái không khí cởi mở. And so in order to create an open environment for conversation, after I have my panelists introduce a little bit about themselves, I'm going to ask a question to you all. So do be prepared to receive a question, and then we're going to turn it back to our panelists to continue the conversation. To start off with, I would like to have each of the panelists, this is just a short introduction, so share a little bit about who you are and why you're here today. Maybe we'll start at the end and come around this way. Mời Đi Đông Xuyến.
I'm going to do English and then recap in Vietnamese. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
So, when I listened to Bỉnh Nhớ, the song from my mom playing, I was just like, the time I was 16 was helped by a middleman to escape from Bà Vũng Tàu, and he actually played that song Bỉnh Nhớ guitar on his guitar, and that was like the whole thing came back for me. Yes, I left Vietnam, escaped in the mid '80s when with our family, and so I was a refugee. And so it's the introduction, and I was introduced to the field of psychology and social work. And it's also education. It's part of healing for me, and I feel privileged to really share or be part of the journey, healing journey of a number, Vietnamese American, first generation, second generation, 1.75 generation, 1.5 generations. So, and that is quite a privilege. Tôi cũng đã từng đi vượt biên một mình lúc 16 tuổi, nghe bản nhạc Bỉnh Nhớ của cái anh mà anh đưa tàu ga nhỏ ra ga lớn, anh chơi cái bản guitar đó, và tôi đi trong cái ngành này thực sự nó cũng là một cái hành trình chữa lành cho mình để mình có thể có những cái vinh dự, những cơ hội để cùng với những người cũng có những cái trải nghiệm đã qua như mình.
Thank you, Quyên. I'm gonna say mostly in English. My Vietnamese very little. My name is Đức Nguyễn. I'm a storyteller. Some people call me documentary filmmaker and whatnot, but I like to be able to define myself as a storyteller, and a storyteller in many forms. and I choose the visual audio medium as my form of telling story because I think telling story is important in terms of preserving your story, your culture, and your history. I'm also a Vietnamese refugee. My family escaped in 1980. We were fortunate to get rescued by a U.S. Navy ship, and we were brought to Thailand and stayed there for a short time, and we settled in the United States. But in the refugee camp, I always hear this story about those people who met the dark fate. Those people who lost at sea, who got killed, drowned, pirated, and the worst is cannibalize each other to survive. And that story stayed with me and became my nightmare. I thought about it all the time, and I was wondering why my family didn't, what happened if my boat encountered that situation. It was driving me crazy. So I want to kind of, learn more about it, and that's a way for me to exercise my demons, right? Like, how am I gonna overcome this unless I deal with straight on? So my first documentary is about this boat that left Vietnam, and they lost at sea for 37 days, and during that time, they encountered a U.S. Navy ship, but they got left behind. So they had to end up doing what they had to do to survive. And it was a really challenging time because at that point, this is back in the late 1990s, early 2000, and me, myself, I never really could talk about being a boat person because it's just a shame, And a lot of people don't even want to mention all the tragedy that we've been through. And for me, telling a story about cannibalism at sea, a lot of people kind of warn me against that. Even my family say, why are you doing this story? We don't want people to know about all these dark memories. But I determined that it doesn't matter whether people want to talk about it or not. There are people out there who want to hear it. So it's important to talk about these memories that we all want to hide. And I think it's fitting for today's topic to talk about the silence, the things that we try to cover and not talk about. So thank you so much.
Before you share, I'm just going to pull this back so I can see your face while you speak. Okay.
Thank you, Glenn. My name is Thảo Hà. I also am a refugee. I came to the U.S. in 1975. I left Vietnam on April 30th. Ba Thảo là không quân. So my dad was a pilot in the South Vietnamese Air Force. Mẹ là thợ may, so she was a seamstress. I was 18 months old, 18 tháng khi qua Mỹ, and we came to Texas first and went around the country and then eventually came back to Texas in Houston, and that's where I grew up. My dad became a machinist, thợ may, and my mom continued as a seamstress. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It was a very rough time during for Vietnamese American, the growth of our communities. The bullying was extreme in Texas. And so to honor this message about talking about things we don't talk about, it's very, to open up and say, that I was a gang member, to say that I participated in violence, and at that time, at the age, seeing it as a form of protection and a form of status when you're feeling like you're looking for something. Eventually, I was shot at a pool hall, and by then I had dropped out of college. So I was going to college, but I didn't do well in college because my parents told me to study biology, but I hated biology and I failed organic chemistry. So I wanted to be a writer. I was told I was a good writer, and I said I want to study English, and my parents were like, "Ủa, tiếng Anh hả? Ủa, không biết tiếng Anh hả? Học tiếng Anh?" I was like, "No, major in English." And they're like, "What?" So, you know, just listening to them because I had already felt bad about being a failure for the bad things I did. Fast forward, I went back to school and you see the bio. And since then, sociology, xã hội học, and justice has been my work. So I won't drag on all the things that I'm doing or whatever, we can have that conversation, but grounded in the conversation of silence and trauma and healing and openness, I feel like the decades, if we're talking about 50 years, of for me has been about being drawn to those who are in suffering, in pain, in silence, and how do we find healing in that.
Thank you so much, Dita. And as you all can see already, just from the introductions, if you were here this morning, it was a session really celebrating the journeys of people in politics, in business, in education, which are beautiful and triumphant to hear about. And we also all know that those are not the only stories that exist in our community. And for this afternoon, we're really focused on those stories that don't get the flashlight, the limelight, because they're not easy to hear about. And so I really appreciate all three of you, even in just the introductions, to name a little bit of what that is. And these are, I have had the privilege of getting to know each of you, and I know that within your work and within your personhood, you have the capacity to see beyond what is the success story and why it's important to tell all of the stories. And so I hope that as we continue this conversation today, we can go deeper and deeper into what that means within the realm of healing and justice and beyond. But in order, I said earlier that I want to ask you all a question. I have a mic runner in the crowd. Thank you, and Alex, hi. We often hear, I heard it in the last session, I'm pretty sure it happened yesterday as well. Lúc mà chúng ta nói về chiến tranh Việt Nam thì chúng ta rất là thường xuyên nghe cái từ trauma. Trauma ở trong tiếng Việt mình gọi là chấn thương. Nếu cái chấn thương đó là một cái physical trauma thì nó là chấn thương. Nếu cái đó là psychological trauma thì đó là chấn thương tâm lý. And so we hear it thrown around all the time, the traumas of war, we carry the traumas. But I wanted to ask a question to the audience right now. When you hear the word trauma, or even the word healing, what is the thing, and try to keep it within just one sentence, if it's a word, that's fine too. What pops up in your mind? How do you think of trauma, especially in these contexts when we talk about the Vietnam War or our community? Okay, I'm gonna give y'all 10 seconds to think about it, and I'd love if I could get a hand up to share. When you hear the word trauma, what pops up in your mind? One sentence or less, okay? Please.
I can do it in one sentence. It's my dad's dog tag.
Thank you.
It saved us because we took it with us, and it proved that he had served in Vietnam Cộng hòa, quân lực Việt Nam Cộng hòa. It expedited our petition for refugee status. When I think dog tag, I think both trauma and healing. Before he passed, he gave it to me. It was the first time in my life that I knew that I carried his blood type.
Thank you.
I had a thought, and then I'm going to go with my original idea, which is the word dreams. I was at a hotel in Hue, and I walked up to the cafe, and I asked them, what's the password for the Wi-Fi? And they said, 68, 68, 68, 68. And it's the ways in which death follows you and haunts you in dreams, in nightmares, and otherwise, and how people who live in trauma live both in the past and in the present.
Thank you so much.
For me, it is about the first time that I cried uncontrollably when the flag was lowered in 1975, I left with my family unexpectedly. Though with my family didn't plan to leave, we did, and it's a long story. When the flag was ordered to be lowered, we had like thousands of people on the ship. We wept, and ever since then, ever since I came to this country, whenever I heard the national anthem at my school, I would weep. I would cry uncontrollably, and my friends, my classmates would look at me as if I were crazy. Like I couldn't explain it, but it reminded me so much of what the trauma that I endured.
Thank you so much. I'll take one more perspective, two more. So 1, 2, and then I'm gonna bring it back to our panelists.
Yeah, I would like to say trauma in general is any incident in your life happen and hurt you so deeply that you cannot get over it, and it's haunt you for a long time. And especially for Vietnam War, of course, happened to so many people and so many incidents impacted us in various ways. So we have million story. I don't think it's 1,000, million story, because we're all impacted in different ways. And myself, I have so many to tell. So I can tell everybody has their own story. Every story is worth to tell and worth to hear.
Thank you. And lastly,
Six words. Việt gian, phản động và Mỹ ngụy.
You can repeat it one more time.
Việt gian, phản động và Mỹ ngụy.
Thank you.
You translate?
I can't translate those. I can translate some of it. Do you want to translate it? Việt gian, phản động.
Mỹ ngụy, phản động.
So reactionary, Việt gian is traitor, Mỹ ngụy is
American puppet.
American puppet. Yes. So I think we'll hold those words because it connects to some of the traumas that the people in this room carry, as well as the traumas that the people within our community carry. Thank you so much to everybody who shared. We heard from each of the responses something that is connected, something that you can hold, something of your fathers that you can hold, and you are reminded of both the trauma and the healing. We heard about dreams, we heard about terms that live inside people, and we heard definitions of trauma that help us understand where does uncontrollable crying happen? Why 50 years later, vì sao 50 năm sau cuộc chiến tranh Việt Nam có rất là nhiều người trong cộng đồng của chúng ta vẫn còn có những ác mộng, có những giây phút mà có những xúc cảm xảy ra mà mình không có giải thích được, có thể là trong một cái cuộc trao đổi, trong một cái cuộc nói chuyện, hoặc là lúc mà đang có một cái sự cảm kích gì đó ở trong gia đình của chúng ta mà mình không có giải thích được. Đó là những cái nguyên nhân của những giây phút đó, nó là cũng là vì các trauma mà nằm ở trong con người Việt Nam của chúng ta. Không cần biết là con người đó là người 80 tuổi hay là có thể là người đó là 10 tuổi, 12 tuổi, 8 tuổi, vẫn có thể có những cái chấn thương đó nằm ở trong con người của mình. Mình rất là hãnh diện được có sự hiện diện của một người bác sĩ chuyên về vấn đề tâm lý. Thì ngày hôm nay, during this panel, I'm going to ask that over the course of the conversation, I shared this with Thị Xuyến already, as she hears of any perspectives and thoughts and insights and wishes to share her professional perspective on it, to feel free to share it at any point. I mentioned earlier that this is a conversation, so I've invited Anh Đức, Thị Thảo, and Thị Xuyến to jump in, ask questions to each other at any point that they wish, but of course I will ask them to share some stories as well. So I wanted you all, I hope our appreciated hearing from the audience, so that we are all on the same page when we say the word trauma and healing. And I think Thị Xuyến wants to maybe share something to start with.
Yeah, the one word that can resonate with me also with trauma is grief and the trouble of self-regulation. Many of the clients that I work with, having both historical trauma and also domestic trauma, right? We talk about the war, but the war happened also at home in the community. You know, we talk about dreams, you know, nightmares and flashbacks and hypervigilant responses for those who have post-traumatic stress disorders. Talk about depressions where people feel empty, apathetic, loss of energy, you know. They're suffering. The trauma also have to do with our sense of safety, our sense of security, our sense of feeling enough. Many of, you know, the second generation also suffer from the sense of feeling enough because their parents didn't feel enough, because their parents didn't feel safe, because of their parents didn't feel secure. So the parenting has a lot to do with fear, right? And so we're talking about intergenerational trauma. I'm talking about my mom, myself, and my son. And it's played out. There was times it was like full blow until I get a hold of it and get onto meditation to help regulate myself, regulate my emotions, my thoughts, and my rage, to be able to recognize that, you know, how harmful that trauma that I've done to my mom, you know, that have to do with, you know, sexual assault. That's have to do with my experience with sexual assaults, you know, being a young refugee at the camp and in the United States when I first came here, for the first few years here. So I definitely think trauma, you know, it's deeper, that it affects both our body, our thoughts, our emotions, and the choices that we made in our lives. So, and our relational intelligence. So I think as, you know, we continue this conversation, we're gonna go into the healing piece, but I think the deeper we understand how the trauma impacts generations of us, but also, you know, trauma brought also meaning, also resiliency, also heroism, you know, many other things along with that. So there's always dialectical perspective of things. So it's not just one side, right? So we're gonna go there, but this is what resonated with me when I'm listening to everyone's sharing.
Thank you. Brenda, do you want to share any response or any thoughts?
Do you want to go first?
No, she's an expert.
Okay. I'm not an expert. I'm just an interpreter. I'm a communicator. So, I don't know. We can play the video because I make video. So I'd rather show a video rather. I'm not a lecturer. So can we play the video? And this is. I had a chance to interview Dr. Dong last year for my documentary, and I learned about trauma from her interview. And this is just an excerpt of that interview put together by Notebook LM. I don't know, you guys know Notebook LM. It's just
Building a new life takes. Should we go back to our seat so that everyone can see? Can you all see?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, they're gonna skip. Okay.
History and professional training that gave Dr. Dong these really profound insights into how trauma doesn't just impact one person. It echoes. It reverberates across entire generations. And this is the central question she's always tackling. It's not genetic, not in the way we usually think about it, but it's passed down all the same. So how does that actually happen? Dr. Don calls it parenting by fear. It starts with the first generation parents who survived unimaginable trauma. War, loss, chaos. Their brains become hardwired for survival, constantly stuck in alarm mode. So what happens? They parent with this intense hypervigilance, using threats to control things. Not because they're malicious, but because that's what their brains are conditioned to do to keep everyone safe. The kids then grow up in this atmosphere of constant low-level threat, and they end up internalizing all that fear without ever having gone through the original trauma themselves. And in her actual clinical practice, Dr. Dong sees this clear pattern. The first generation, the ones who lived through the war, they often present with classic PTSD. But by the time you get to the second generation, who didn't live through it, that trauma has morphed, it's transformed, into high rates of anxiety and depression, often fueled by intense family pressure and this inherited sense of unease.
So this is the core of it. This is intergenerational trauma. It's the unconscious transfer of survival conditioning. It's parents with the best of intentions accidentally passing down their own fear and anxiety, which then prevents their children from ever developing that fundamental sense of emotional safety.
But okay, even when people are clearly suffering from this, there are these huge obstacles that prevent so many in the Vietnamese American community from ever getting the help they need.
First, you've got the cultural barriers. There's this tendency to prioritize physical health, a broken bone, something you can see and touch, over mental health. Combine that with a lack of education about what mental health even is, plus a really strong cultural emphasis on saving face and pleasing others instead of taking care of yourself, and you get this powerful stigma.
And then, on top of that, you have these systemic barriers. There is a massive shortage of Vietnamese-speaking and culturally competent providers. There are practically no support groups, almost zero specialized services for things like gambling dependency, and a real shortage of residential homes for those with severe mental illness. The basic infrastructure, it just isn't there. And this right here, this is the heartbreaking result of all of those barriers. Many people in the community don't even know what good mental health care looks like, or that they're even entitled to it in the first place. They don't know what to ask for because they've never seen it. And that creates this vicious cycle where the community stays chronically underserved.
But, and this is a really big but, despite all of these challenges, Dr. Dong's message is ultimately one of hope. She sees immense strength within the community, and she sees a clear path forward toward healing.
The healing, she says, is built on the community's inherent strengths, the stuff that's already there. I mean, this is a community with absolutely incredible resilience and survival skills. There's a powerful sense of collectivism, where families will go to incredible lengths to care for their own. And when they do get help that actually works, the gratitude is just immense.
For Dr. Dong, healing really begins by turning inward. Now, in a culture that often puts a huge emphasis on pleasing others, this idea of cultivating a kind relationship with yourself can feel really foreign, but she believes it is the absolute foundation for well-being.
And her prescription for this is just beautifully simple. Number 1, talk to yourself kindly. Be your own friend. Number 2, stop comparing yourself to others, which is a huge source of stress in the community. And number 3, practice non-judgment, both towards yourself and towards other people. These 3 simple things, they form the core of a healthy internal life. And this is her ultimate hope. This really sums up her life's work and her vision for her community's future. A future where self-compassion isn't some strange concept, but it's a cornerstone of a healthy, thriving life. Dr. Dong's story is such a powerful reminder that sometimes our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths. And it leaves us all with a really critical question to think about. In our own lives, what is one small way we can practice that kindness toward ourselves, starting today?
Thank you.
Hey, real quick, thousands of Americans are taking advantage of the number one.
Thank you. So I learned so much about trauma from talking to Dr. Dong, because trauma to me is something, it's not tangible, right? It's not like something that you obtain and you store it and it come back to you. It transforms. It changes as you go along, and it changes through generations. And I didn't understand much about it, but I live with it. I live with it all my life, and I didn't realize it because sometimes there's certain thought or a certain emotion that just stay with me all day long. And then I was just like, why am I feeling this way? Like my present is not catered to that emotions, or that emotion doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing now, but it stayed with me. And I keep questioning myself, like, why am I feeling this way? And then I started learning about it, and I just realized that trauma lives in your body. Sometimes you have that little tense in your neck, or you have a little headache, you feel a certain way. That is the way your brain tells you that there's certain trauma, there's certain memories in your brain that give you that indications. So I started learning about it, and I think the word that Dr. Dong said was be kind to yourself. Learning about yourself is the most crucial thing. I just realized that in terms of overcoming your trauma is learning about your body, about yourself. So that's all I have to say about trauma.
And thank you for sharing the video that you created based on Dr. Swing's conversation with you, because it really helps us frame the conversation that we're having today. Of course, I wanted to start off by hearing what are our perspectives of trauma, but seeing it broken down in that way, we can see this is not just how it manifests in the war in the household, as you were saying, but it's also how it manifests in the literal war in our streets, in our communities. When we talk about criminal justice, when we talk about harm that is enacted in the community, how does that happen? Does it happen out of nowhere? Is it because there are just bad, evil people in the world? Or is it something else? When you lash out on a member of your family, or when a member of your family lashes out on you, is it because that person is evil or bad, or is it because of something else? And I think that opening and framing the conversation surrounding trauma in this way helps us gain more compassion and also deeper understanding of the origins of those things. And so with that, I want to ask a question to you all about sharing a story, whether it's personal or professional, that is connected to this topic, right? It's connected to trauma, loss, or healing that has really shaped your work or who you are, right? So I'll repeat that one more time. So I'm asking Quyên đang xin các diễn giả chia sẻ một câu chuyện ở trong cuộc đời của mình, có thể là liên quan với một cái chấn thương, một cái sự mất mát mà đã là giống như là một cái giây phút hoặc là một cái câu chuyện rất là quan trọng đối với cái công việc của mình hoặc là cuộc đời của mình. Thì Quyên sẽ mời diễn giả của mình chia sẻ. Chắc mình bắt đầu với tiến sĩ Tạ Thảo.
Oh, well, a story, well, first, let me add to the trauma is that systemic barrier. So, Thảo dạy xã hội học Đại học Miracle Coast College. So I'm a professor of sociology at Miracle Coast College. And sociology, people think is, oh, we blame society for everything. No, we don't blame society for everything, but we can blame society for some things. And so those systemic, structural, cultural systems have to be undone. But we also do have to have that personal responsibility and self-care. If you have only the self-awareness, you're not aware of what's outside that could be harming you. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have stress, you have anxiety, you have depression because your work is taking so much out of you. And you watch Oprah, and Oprah says, oh, bring a picture of your kids and put it on your desk, and every time you feel sad, look at the picture of your kids and you'll feel better. Okay, maybe, oh, you should breathe and you should meditate. And that's a great individual. But the systemic thing is, what is the workplace policy that is causing you and everybody else to be working so much, right? So we have to think about those things and battle and make changes in that. So I love that video because in my own journey, I can see myself traveling along that stuff that you shared. I'm like, I'm about to cry. So the story that I want to tell is not really about me, but it is about the work that I do. So it's aside from teaching sociology, I run a nonprofit. And the nonprofit was because on my campus, I run a program for people who come home from prison to go to college. And my nonprofit is about the community and what support we can give them outside of the college. And believe it or not, I meet a lot of Vietnamese people coming home from prison. And the nonprofit then says you have a chance to start over because you have completed your sentence, you have changed your life, and you want to do better. So we help them do better. And this story I'm about to tell you is about the nonprofit work that I do now because these people are facing deportation. So these are all my clients, or we call them community members. And the story I want to tell them is about is Yung. And on the left is a picture of Yung. He is a Vietnamese American child of a refugee, He grew up in Oklahoma. He then went to prison for child rape. But that is the label that the state of Oklahoma put on him because he was 18 years old and he had a girlfriend who was 15, and that was illegal. And so the mother of the girlfriend reported them, and he was charged and convicted of child rape. He did his time in prison, a few years. He comes home, he gets a job, he gets married, he has a family. He loves his mom, who is a single mom. When I talked to his mother, she had come to the US as a refugee. Her husband, the father of the children, left, and she was a single mom raising 4 kids. So Young was the son of a single mom, got into the prison system, came home. And for those of you who don't understand the criminal justice system, there is a system called vidIQ, which is criminalization. A criminal conviction can make you deportable if you are not a citizen. Young was not a citizen at the time that he got charged with this crime. Because Vietnam, before 1995, was not accepting people who were refugees, the US could not deport them. So he lived here in limbo as a category C18, somebody with a removal order but could not be deported. And there's a certain limit that you can do and things you can do and jobs you can have. But he had a normal life. And this year, but what they do have to do is check in with ICE every year. And every year he was checking with ICE. And this year in March, he went to check in with ICE and he was detained and put in a detention center. Because my nonprofit, his wife called and said, I need help. I don't know what Vietnam is going to do. I don't know if Vietnam will take him. I don't know why he's in detention. I didn't think that he could get deported. I talked to his mother. His mother cried. She said, I don't know what to do. My son is in ICE detention. Eventually, I understood by that time in March that Vietnam was taking people who came before 1995 and that ICE was getting travel documents to send him to Vietnam. 3 months after detention, he called me and he said, Jitao, they're sending me to Louisiana. I think they're going to send me to Vietnam. I said, okay, we're going to have help for you in Vietnam because there's an organization there. 2 days later, we don't hear from him. And on Monday, because he called me on Saturday, and Monday, his wife is calling the facility and they said he's been deported, but they won't tell him where. But I knew that the flight to Vietnam had not taken off yet. So in the news, they have a picture of him, that one, and he was deported to Africa. He is in Eswatini, still in prison, and his mom cries to me, I don't know, every month I check in with her, and we are still trying to bring him home, but he is one story of the many where I'm going to tell later about Thai, also a refugee, Melissa, a nail salon worker, also a refugee, Jill, also a refugee. I was a graduate student at Cal State San Marcos with a degree and on his way, but was also detained and deported a week ago. So these are the stories of our community that I currently hold a lot of trauma and pain and trying to work through what healing will look like for this community.
Thank you. I'm going to share a story, and this story happened maybe like a month ago. It's not like Wing says, like sometimes some of the stories are hard. This story is really hard because about 4 weeks ago, my uncle, like maybe at 9 o'clock at night, he called me in the middle of the night and they say, Em just hung herself. You know, he's 80-some years old, my uncle. He rented a room from this woman, from this family here in Little Saigon. And Em is the little girl that grew up, you know, where he lived, so he knew her from very little. She's in her 40s. And she tried to commit suicide weeks before. And her parents told everyone that she got COVID. That's why she went to the hospital. They never told anyone what she tried to do until she hung herself in the backyard on a cây mận. Then when they came home and they found her, and they still hid the story. They still telling people that she died of COVID.
Wow.
You know? And when I learned that, and when I start seeing the news where some of the community members are honoring a slain activist, he's not even Vietnamese. You know? And I walk out to the Huntington Beach Pier, and I saw this altar of this slain activist, and I walked by there. The people who put together that altar was Vietnamese. And I started asking myself, it's like, why can't we talk about our own people that die in the community while we honoring someone who's not even in this community? And that's what drove me to do the kind of work that I do, to speak about the silence, to speak about the unspoken, to speak about a story that is not being honored.
Before I welcome Patty to share her story, I do want to just first acknowledge, maybe if all of us could take a deep breath together. I want to acknowledge that the conversation and the topics that are taking place in this session can be a little bit heavy. Sometimes they can be a bit triggering. And so for anybody who needs to take a moment to step outside, please do. You are 100% welcome to do that because, we never know what comes up for people when we talk about the things that we're talking about. But thank you so much to our panelists for sharing these stories. And please,
Yeah. So we talk about systematic trauma. Let me share a little bit about this very recent, this last week. I have a client who, there's a lot of domestic violence in her life. Right? She was abused about maybe 40 years, and her children was very abused too. So her son became an abuser to his sister. And so this mom is a mom where the sibling fighting or the brother was after the sister with a knife, she would crawl on the ground and she'd pee on the floor, and she would groaning, you know, it's like tiếng hú á, hú rất là không biết gì nữa hết á. When she was so scared because she was so abused by her own husband, but now witnessing that, and she felt so helpless that she could not save her children, her daughter, and her sons too, because they was also abused by the father. So talking about breathing, we breathe about over 20,000 breaths a day for survival, natural, but only the breath that Queen was asking us to do, the very conscious breathing that we pay attention to, you know, deep breathing or in and out of our nose, those are the ones that's helping us to regulate ourselves, right? Helping us to hit that nerve system right here, you know, face up here and around here, the vagus nerve system to help relax us. So, you know, when I do the session with her, I held her hands, right? She was crying uncontrollably, right? When she shared her story, I held her hands and then we breathed together. Her stress was at level 9 or 10, and we breathe together, it go down to 7, and then it go down to 5, it go down to 3. And then she also learned to soothe herself too by her own, you know, self-touch and all that before we can have a conversation, right? So this is the story of trauma. And I also remember Yu Quat, you know, I'm not giving the first name, but I'm going to give a different name, but Yu Quat. He was only 16 when he signed up for military in Vietnam before 1975. Tại vì chú was một côi, chú không có mẹ mất, nên chú muốn đi vô trong quân đội để được săn sóc. So he's 16, but he said he's 18. So he got to be in the battlefield, and he experiencing his friend being killed, but not him. So he had this survival guilt, right? So he quit that and he went in the city and he signed up for Cảnh, what Cảnh would be police, right? But then he was recruited to police investigation, and he had to do the things that he did not want to do in terms of investigating and imposing physical trauma on the subjects to get information, and that was traumatizing for him. So he had very severe PTSD. He would have dreams that he would see people that we normally don't see because his neurochemical make that visual hallucinations. So he would see people come and go after him, in his dream or in the middle of the day that he would see people standing here and there and go after him. So this is right now, right? So, and so he could not stay with his family because he feared that his rage, his displacement will destroy them. So he would live by himself. He would live himself for years now. But the healing came when his pain and his struggle acknowledged, validated, and also the meaning that he found, where now it is here today, right? He got involved into the adult day health center of the seniors, and then he met friends, and he had friends, and he had coffee with them, and it gave him the normalcy in the relational healing, sense of safety, that normalcy that he never did really have within himself. So connecting with other Vietnamese peers, his peers, sharing that he's not alone, and it was helping him. So this is another story. And then the last one is a lady by herself right now, the first generation. Her husband passed away before she escaped from Vietnam. She took her son to escape from Vietnam, stay at refugee camp, and her son, 10 years old, passed away, right? So she's very much alone, and she was repatriated back to Vietnam herself. And then for the grace of God, somehow the policy here in the US picked her up again, and took her out of all the things that she's familiar with to be here, and she alone by herself today.
Wow.
That is another story here. So this is, we talked about, we have so much, right, from family, community, systemic trauma, and the whole historical trauma that our people go through. Yeah.
Thank you. I think one of the interesting things is when Anduk, you were sharing about the very horrific story that you experienced just very recently. Embedded in the story you were telling is this question and this really, I think, something that probably most people in this room are familiar with, the silence and the shame that takes place in our culture and in our families. The fact that a child committed suicide and the family chose to, even after the death, hide that from the community. I think one of the things that is very powerful about the stories that you shared, Dr. Swing, is that you shared the power of acknowledgement, about lifting and getting that story out. I hope that even in the process of having this conversation, we're getting things out, because at the end of the day, if we don't get the things out, they remain inside. And it goes back to that question you were asking, Anduk, why can't we talk about the things happening in our families, in our communities, and we look elsewhere to celebrate, commemorate something outside of us? And I think it still connects to that fear that you're talking about, the fear that shapes the parenting techniques, the choices that members of our family and our community make. And so within just the two shares, those two stories alone, we see that cycle. What happens when we hide? What happens when we keep things in the dark? And what happens when we bring them to light? And so my next question, I have just two questions, and then I'm gonna open it up to the audience to share. My next question is, we are hearing about all that remains unsaid, unheard, and unseen in this community. What helps people move past that? You've shared a little bit about that already, but I'd love to ask all panelists, what helps our community and people move past that? And in that process, what should we be careful about?
I can try. From my experience as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, right? A lot of time I show my film and in an environment like this, and I feel that you need to have that space. You need to have that safe space for people to share, to be able to open up, because like Dr. Dong was saying, that connection, that understanding that people will listen to what you have to say is important. My job most of the time is not talking, it's about listening, right? My job is listening to what people have to say, listen to their story, so I can share it with other people. So create that space is so important, like event like this, and I would love to hear from the audience out there if you want to share your own experience, because that is healing itself. That is sharing with other people and have other people empathize with what you're going through, and that create a safe environment for you to be open up more about your story, your experience, your emotion. So I think that is key, and that's what we're trying to do with my work, is to create a campaign to create a safe space for people to gather through storytelling. We use film as like a campfire, to get people sitting around and people can discuss and connect. I think that's the key.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, just being heard. People will say, "Oh, I feel heard. I feel seen. I feel like you understand me." I mean, that at the root is this where the seed comes to grow into healing. And in this work, it sounds very depressing. You're separated from your family, your parents, your siblings, your kids, your children, the community. You had been exiled from Vietnam decades ago, and now you're being exiled out of the U.S. to a place you don't know. Your whole life is now disrupted within 3 months in a surprise ICE check-in. And the thing that I've learned is when, like you and Luc, when people call me, I'm just listening. It's really maybe 10 minutes of like, what's your situation? What's the conviction? How can we fix this? Okay, maybe we're not. And then it's another half an hour, maybe sometimes 45 minutes of listening to the wife or the father, the parent, the mom, the child, the young children whose parents are first generation, who came over by boat, and having them cry and try to plan, what's next? What do I do now, right? If my dad's gonna be deported, what do I do? And when I talk directly to the person that's impacted, people will call me before they've been detained, they'll call me from ICE detention, and the number one comment I get is, so why do you do this? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you care? Nobody's ever cared about us, and we don't talk about it, and nobody, there's these legal options where you have to demonstrate that you're a good person now. So they want letters from your community, from your friends, from your neighbors, from the church. And this lady said to me, she said, "Gee, I know that that's important for and my husband's case, but nobody knows about his old conviction. So we don't want to tell anybody, because if we ask them, they'll know." And I said, "Yeah, but this can save your husband. Like, he can stay." And she's like, "I know, but I don't know." And she was struggling with getting letters of support from people because of something he did 25 years ago. So it's just that ability to speak out in a safe space and know that people are listening, hearing without judgment. right? Is so powerful because these people have hope after. They do. They have a lot of hope even after what we're seeing as something really tragic.
Thank you. Yes. And before I ask Dr. Ilsung to share, I just want to kind of bring it back. Obviously, Dr. Tao has shared a little bit about her work. I want to kind of take a moment to acknowledge, obviously, if you looked at her bio, you know that she is a professor. She's also the executive director of Collective Freedom. And so when she's talking about receiving these phone calls, she's talking about all of the rapid response. So families who don't know what to do about their family members or their close friends who are experiencing this situation of double exile. So people who were impacted by the criminal justice system and then now are at risk of deportation. And I just really appreciate hearing how, as a storyteller, Anouk is naming the transformative power of just listening to people. And Dr. Tauha is sharing that in her work, in theory, the people need to get lawyers, to get their removal orders vacated, their convictions vacated. And yet, the through line of all three of your work is this piece right here that you're talking about. Sure, the person who calls you, Tao, asks about these very technical things, and what she's sharing is the 30 minutes afterwards is about hearing them. And even when she listens, they ask, why are you listening to me? Why do you care? And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that the power of hearing, being heard.
And I think that's the collective empathy in the system, in this healthcare services. Anything that have to do with human capital, I think is so important. I think it's so important that our system think about, preventing the developmental deprivation for people. I mean, the experience of war, domestically, historically, all that is a deprivation of needs. Right? And so the system really needs to focus on that, prevent that deprivation, and also ensure that the basic human rights of people having the opportunities to flourish their essence and not being denied by that. I think it's so important. And that at the macro level. I mean, at the community level, within this community here, I am so grateful to many services and programs that have been out there. Let me list it a little bit so you guys know what they are. I'm so grateful to the parents who break the cycles and choose unconditional love for their kids. And I see that. I see that parents who actually attending meditation center, Lam Mai or something, sorry, I forgot the name, and actually trying to be learning unconditional, being unconditional with their kids. There is Vietnamese meditation and Tai Chi groups from La Boying to Little Saigon temples. There are many meditations groups. There's a singing choirs and prayer groups within the Vietnamese Catholic communities that many of my clients are part of, that it's bring collective healing for them. Those create a voice, those create a sense of meaning, the sense of that they can make a difference. And there's art, writing, and filmmaking, telling the truth. We have writers like Ocean Boom, we have director Duke, we have so many actors and actresses that Isa, here and Vala nourish that. And that is collective healing for generations. And I'm very grateful to that. And there is also holistic community health center, integrated care like Saolan, like Nilma Medical Clinic. And I think then also the article arch. Just recently, the LGBTQ 1.5 generation group, they had a performance, theater art, the play called Nami Nam Nhật của Mẹ, 50 years of my mother's diary. And they told stories about the first generation, second generation. And they brought tears to those who see themselves in those stories. and sharing the same collective empathy. And so they performed it here, and they was asked to perform in San Jose, and they did, and now they're being asked to perform in, I believe, in Texas, Houston. So these are the creative, very creative practices that I think our community try to heal ourselves, and I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing those. And I just want to be conscious of time. I had that one question left, and I want to make sure to ask it. I am going to ask if the organizers are okay with me to take another 10 minutes after, just to run about 10 minutes over to make sure that we have time for the final question and questions from the audience as well. And so my last question, and then for anyone who has comments or questions, I'll open the stage up in a second. My last question to all of you is, if you could share something that, as you do the work you do, or as you've done the work that you've done, what is one thing that you wish people understood? So the one thing that you wish people in the community understood. And I had messaged them on the side and said to them, this could be the thing that keeps you up at night.
Okay, I'll go again. To me, I'm sorry, I'm a little shallow, but I just want to let people know that everything that I do, or specifically the work that I do, costs money. Okay, it's just expensive to make film. You know, it takes money to make anything work. So you have to understand. Please don't come to me and say, "Let's make this film" without any money. Okay, so I have so many people come to me and say, "Oh, this is a beautiful story. Let's you to do it. Where's your budget?" Oh, I ain't got none. Okay, so that's all I have to say.
You know, I want to echo that. I mean, I'm on the board of Vietnamese American Arts and Letters Association. We host the Vid Film Fest, and yes, these amazing films come out, and people are like, "Oh, it was so good. You should make a film about this, and you should have this film, and we should tell this film." And I'm like, "Yeah, it needs $500,000, you know, at minimum," and they're just kind of like, you know, shocked. So yes, let's echo that. You know,
Show me the money.
Yeah.
Yes.
One thing
Money
that I
talk.
wish people knew about my work is, you know, I majored in sociology eventually, and everyone asked me in the Vietnamese community back in the day, what are you going to do with that? What is that? What's social work? Isn't that really poor pay? Like, are you going to make any money? And I have never cared about that. Like, for me, I would like people to know that when you want to work in the field of helping people, in the field of serving people, there is an intrinsic value that money cannot buy. And for me, no matter how much I've been paid or not been paid, what grounds me and what keeps me going is it is just a priceless feeling when you know that you have made something better in this world. When there's darkness in these different spaces, that you're bringing light to people. Because the beauty of that is that it brings light to you. Right? And I've been through a lot. I got some stories to tell. I have a book coming out next year. You can read all the dirty trauma that I've been through and all that. So I feel that the way that I was able to move through that and get to a place where I swear to God, people are like, what do? You work with all these bad people. Why are you so bubbly and happy all the time? I'm like, man, life is good right now, okay? We have it worse somewhere else. So how do we hold space for you? And so again, that is the value of social services, human services. So if anyone doubts about like going into that field or being interested in that, like don't let the idea that like you won't make a lot of money you know, be a barrier. And so I wish parents would know that too. And that goes the same for art. They want to be a filmmaker, they want to be a singer, a dancer, actress, you know. There's beauty in that too.
I'm with you. So, you know, before I came here today, I got the email from Wynn asking this question, and then I thought about it. So I actually wrote a poem, but then I also wrote a message to the community. So the poem is more personal, and the community, maybe I like to share with you what I just wrote very quickly about the community. Okay. Yeah. So I want our community to know that we deserve a loving relationship with ourselves, with all that we have endured and all that we are still becoming. Trauma is not only a story in the mind, it is carried in the body. It shapes our breath, our muscle, our posture, our nervous system. This is why somatic healing, releasing what the body has held, is just as vital emotional expression or cognitive insight. Without attending to the body, a part of the healing remains incomplete. And I want the community to know that across decades of clinical work in integrated behavioral health, I have seen again and again that people do not heal through judgment or pressure. They heal through non-judgmental relationships, collective compassion, and genuine human kindness. When we feel safe, seen, and accepted, the body softens. The mind becomes steadier, the heart opens again. And lastly, I want the community to know that I wish our community understood that every person has the fundamental right to be their true, unfiltered essence, not shaped by fear, shame, or expectation, but by dignity and belonging. And when we make room for one another's humanity, we begin to repair what generation of trauma, war, and silence have fractured.
Và bây giờ Quyên sẽ mời quý vị nếu có ai có câu hỏi cho các diễn giả hoặc là có thể muốn chia sẻ một câu giống như hồi nãy Joseph, người điều hợp viên trước Quyên có nói là mình giới hạn về thời gian, cho nên lúc mà quý vị chia sẻ câu hỏi hoặc là có thể chia sẻ một cái suy nghĩ, cảm nghĩ thì xin nói khoảng 1 hoặc 2 câu thôi để mình có cơ hội để nghe từ vài người khác nhau. Và Quyên cũng xin lỗi là xin mọi người thông cảm là mình không có cơ hội để thông dịch tất cả những cái lời chia sẻ của các diễn giả tại vì thời gian bị giới hạn. Yeah. And so now I'll open it up for questions. Please keep it short, 1 to 2 sentences, and it can be a question or a comment. And we'll start over here in the middle, and then we'll go to the front, and then I think we had one in the back. Dane over here. Do we have a mic?
Dana, Alisa, bring it over.
Give it a second. You'll have a mic.
Thank you, everybody, for all your insight. This is an unexpected observation. I noticed that everybody chosen for the panel, experts in something about trauma, but then also you all have something in common, which is art. You just read us some poetry, you're a storyteller, you lead Mala, you, even our moderator, Nguyen, you're a creative in LA. As Vietnamese who just arrived to America, in my memory, we weren't really allowed to choose arts at all. That's probably when our trauma was at its peak. Now, you initiate conversation on trauma and healing it, but you also have something to do with art. Is this a new thing for our people now? We can pursue art, or what's the parallel, do you think?
I don't think that's from the artist.
Okay, I'll go again.
Ladies first.
You know something? Art saved my life. Okay, so when I was in Vietnam, post-war, during the war, post-war, I couldn't stand listening to the news and what's going on around me. It's just so much stress, so much chaos, so much, bad news. So what I did was I basically draw stick figures all day long. I draw soccer games, like imagine a soccer game and draw a stick figure, and that allowed me to escape. And that's my response to the trauma that I was experiencing. I escaped from that environment, and art took me there, allowed me to avoid the trauma that I'm surrounded by. And to me, you know, I don't think myself as talent or anything like that. I was just pure survival skill. You know, I do it because that is what I know. That's how I learned to survive. You know, like, and growing up, I guess my parents didn't pressure me into being a doctor or all of that. They allowed me to practice what I know, right? And in school, when I came to the United States, I didn't learn a word of English, but I thrive in art class. You know, I got A's in art class and all of that. And that, to me, I realized that's my potential, that's my skill, and that's what I can thrive on. I don't need to be master at, you know, English or math or anything like that. I mean, I thought I can survive on art, but then when it comes to real life, it's like you can't really survive on art alone. So you make a shift and stuff like that. But I think the message I would say to you is that if that's your chosen field or what your interest is, go for it. Because in this country, we value everything. We not just value you as being a doctor or you being an engineer. If you're good at something, people will value you for it.
Yeah, let me add. I'll add to what Sue was saying about the trauma of safety and that first generation people who came here pretty much lost everything, and so that their trauma was carrying over to their children of like, I need you to be safe, I need you to be okay, I need you to not be poor like we are right now, right? So this worry and anxiety, and so when they hear their child saying, I want to be an artist, like that, it's a trauma response for them. Like, no, you can't. Like, how are you going to take care of yourself? It's like a physical, like, ick, right? And so that's where that first generation. So then you see the next generation getting better, and where we got the degrees that our parents wanted, and the children are good now, and they're like, okay, you know what, we're safe, and we have savings. You know, you wanna be an actress, Queen? Go ahead, you know, like, you wanna make films? Yeah, so it takes that safety for a generation of like the Vietnamese community of refugees to work through that. And that's why I think we're only just starting to see the burgeoning of more art, and I'm really excited to see what's to come. And second, I'm just gonna add one more thing about art saving you. So I don't want to confess this in front of Jisoo that I don't like to talk about myself with people. So many people are like, have you talked to a counselor yet? Have you had a therapist? Do you have you've been so much grief? And I'm like, no, that's okay. I'm like, I don't want to talk to nobody. No. I'm good. Right? No, I don't want to talk to, no. And then my college, after I had lost somebody, they're like, how do you need some time off? No. I'm good. I'm just going to go back to work. Right? And I'm trying to figure out why that is. I don't want to talk to anybody. But I'll write it all out. I'll put it in a journal. I'll put it in a diary. And then sometimes I share it. And then now it's like this whole long journey diary that I'm okay here. Please read it, but I don't want to talk about it.
You know, that is self-healing. I mean, there's many ways to do healing. You don't have to see a therapist. You really don't. There is so many ways for healing, really. No, you don't have to. And just to hear you writing a journal, I mean, that is a form of healing. We have a young Pablo, he wrote books.
Oh, yes.
And his books is so healing. He's a writer, So the one thing that I see so many hopes here is 1.75 and second generation parents, they're so much better than my generation being parents, because I see them how they embrace their children as they are, how they expose their children to many different things and not judging for if their kids are interested in arts or crafts, all those things. And that's hope. That is, like you said, it's we evolve. We all collectively, we evolve. Yeah.
Thank you. We have one question in the front, and if
I have
anybody
a
else
burning
has a
question
just raise your
for
hand.
Dr. Don and Thảo Hà. I don't know if it's true that when I had to take the counseling degree because I had a teaching credential, but I don't have a counseling credential, and then was working at Berkeley High. I have to go to Cal State Haywood, called Cal State of the East Bay, and my professor asked me, how do Vietnamese deal when they have trauma? So I told them, đi coi bói. Nói với bạn bè thân, xong rồi đi gặp mấy ông sư hay là mấy ông cha để mà xưng tội hay là không chứ. Thì I don't know if that's true, but then because I think silence is a thing with Vietnamese. Người mình là cứ nói là người chịu đựng dai dẳng, resilient. But war and all these terrible trauma that happened to us as a race kept it bottled up. So how do they? I mean, earlier you said you can do other things. You don't have to go see a psychiatrist. But how do you deal with trauma? Like story that you tell me, and I work as a court interpreter. And the last few years in immigration, and I have people who've been deported because for some reason they never became citizens. And under the first term of Trump, there was I think at the last count was 800 something who were deported to Vietnam. And I had to go to Vietnam and interview some of these, and one of them is Amerasian. He's half American and half Vietnamese, and he sits in the coffee shop. Has nobody there, and then I hate to use the word vidIQ, but then a whole bunch of people give him money. So how do you deal with that? Just because we are Vietnamese and we are resilient, we bore all these trauma for thousands of years under the domination of China, French.
May I respond to that? May I respond to that quickly?
Thank you.
When I said, there are many paths to healing, there's no one path for everybody. That's what I meant, right? However, I'd say in self-compassion practice, it says, you do what works for you, what benefits you, right? However, if you have what we call in my field, it's called disorder, where it's the symptoms that you're experiencing impact your functions, your work life, your relationship, your school life, that because of those symptoms, you cannot function. Yes, you're gonna wanna see someone to help support you along the way, right? So I think that is a continuum where you want to get help or start your own healing, and it depends on the severity of your condition, the frequency, of the symptom that you're experiencing, right? The recent frequency and the impairment, right? So that would be in a nutshell of my answer. And the individual that you mentioned, I think they can greatly benefit from having someone professional to work with them along their journey. Both, whether therapist, psychologist, clinical social worker, psychiatrist, if they do need medication at the moderate and severe conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do I keep turning this off? I think that the question of how does our community heal, right? Because we've been through so much, and there's so much stuff that's happened to the community. I think there has, from what I've observed, there's healing already in some spaces. And how do we find ways to grow that, nurture that? And I want to encourage, if you're here at this moment listening to this, I hope you feel that each one of you have an opportunity to think and reflect and to start sharing, because what we need is a collection of voices, a collection of people to start being bold and brave and courageous, because what happens is when you share, someone else shares, and then someone else shares. And when you're working with them, so for me, it's about community. And how do you build that community of talking? You probably have some really amazing stories as a court interpreter going to Vietnam, talking to these deported people. You should be sharing that story, right? You should be opening up and thinking about those emotions and feelings, and also share, being the voice for the voiceless. Like, nobody's talking about these people right now. They're barely in the news, right? And so how do we all champion what we've heard, So the challenge for the audience is, don't just leave this thought or this emotion or this experience here, like, carry that forward, be part of a collective healing for our community.
Thank you, and I think that's a really great way to end this panel. Thank you so much to the audience for your engagement with our panelists. A huge thank you to our panelists, of course, Dr. Susie Dong Suying, Director Đức Nguyen, and Dr. Thảo Hà, for your insights, your openness, your stories, and everything that you do for us and with us. And thank you to all of the organizers of the program for putting this together. It is very rare to have the opportunity during a conference where we are to talk about the past, Vietnamese history, present, and the future, where we are able to sit down in an intimate roundtable to talk about trauma and healing. So that's huge, and that is all thanks to the Vietnamese Heritage Museum, to Alex Hai and everybody for the opportunity to do that and to hold that. I know we have one hand up, but I think we have run out of time.
Yeah, unfortunately. Maybe next year I'll extend this to 3 hours.
Let's give a huge round of applause to our panelists and our organizers.
Alrighty. Before we move on, we only have 15 minutes before we have the next session at 3:30 on culture, media, and arts across generations. Our last panel for today. But before we end, we have a small token of appreciations for our presenters and moderators today. First, Dr. Thảo Hà. Director Đức Nguyen. Dr. Susie Sweetnell. And my amazing colleague, moderator, Nguyen Ngo.
Yes, excellent.
Actually, we only have 12 minutes. So you might as well, you guys just sit here or just go grab a quick coffee, drinks, or whatnot and come back.
If we need to go outside, the restroom is right outside the door, but please hurry back because we do have our panelists for the next round ready for the next subject, and we would like